I'd like to open this with an observation from an essay written in 1841 by Ralph Waldo Emerson. The essay was called Self-Reliance. He said, "A man should learn to detect and watch that gleam of light which flashes across his mind from within, more than the luster of the firmament of bards and sages. Yet he dismisses without notice his thought, because it is his. In every work of genius, we recognize our own rejected thoughts. They come back to us with a certain alienated majesty." What he is saying here is that we shouldn't be paying so much attention to the bards and sages and all that has been written, but indeed that we should look within at our own thought and not reject it just because it's our own. Valerie Hunt spoke about this in The Infinite Mind. And she said the thing that is the most troubling for most people is not only that they don't treasure their own divinity, but they're terrified of it. Because they have been raised to believe that that which is divine is separate from who we are. That God, or spirit, or whatever it is that we want to call this force, is something that is outside of us. That divinity is external to ourselves. You know, in the Course in Miracles, they use the word problem twice. In the first case, they say you don't have any problems, though you think you have. And I've addressed that already. And I wrote an entire book about it called The Spiritual Solution to Every Problem. The second place that they mention the word problem is where they said, if you do have any problems, you only have one. And your problem is your belief that you are separate from God. Your belief that you are separate from God. And it goes on to suggest, and I have elaborated on this at length in this program and in the other places where I've written, suggesting that it was only when we separated ourselves from God that we took on something called problems. And as we began to separate ourselves from God, we took on something that is called, of course, this thing is called the ego. And the ego isn't, it isn't anything that you can just check into a hospital, say, look, my problems all stem around this thing called ego. I would like an egoectomy. Just remove it, please, and then I will be fine. The ego is it's just an idea that we carry around. And when we took this on, we separated ourselves from our divinity, which we can never be separate from, except in our minds. And in our minds, we began to use our minds in such a way that we created all of these things that we now come to call problems, and many suggest that we even call diseases. That our diseases that we experience in the world come about as a result of the way that we think. We know that our thoughts can create diseases. We know that we can raise our blood pressure by the way that we think. Certainly we know that an ulcer has something to do with the way that we process events in the world, that this physical thing that shows up in our body is related to the kinds of ways that we stressfully process our life. And I'd like to suggest, of course, that treasuring your divinity is nothing more than recognizing that it was perfection that you were born into. One of the other observations that was made by the Transcendentalists is expressed by Emerson. He said, the Transcendentalists believed that a perfect God would not create imperfection. And thus, man is inherently good, not bad. But we haven't been really raised that way. And further, they believed that they were armed at birth with God-given tools, such as a conscience, to help us to attain the divinity they believe Christ, in the example of his life, promised us. They saw God expressed in nature and in the soul of each and every individual. That a God that is perfect, a God that is divine, would not be someone or something that would be about creating imperfection. That we are perfect creations. And the idea that we were born into sin and that there is something wrong with us and we are constantly in a battle to overcome the inherent badness of our creation is something that the Transcendentalists rejected, and I do as well. That God is good. In Psalms it says, "Be still and know that I am God." In the stillness you will know that.